welcome to Alien Whispers. If you enjoy the story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment below. Now, let's dive into the story. Jackson Cole adjusted the collar of his nanofabric jacket. Its sleek surface cool against his skin, a subtle reminder of how far he was from Earth. Virion Station thrummed around him, a dazzling nexus of trade and culture, its corridors alive with the hum of quantum tech and the chatter of 100 species. He'd clawed his way into a coveted role. Chief Coordinator for the Nexus Array, a network of quantum gates that would stitch galaxies together. It was a project to redefine the cosmos, and Jackson was determined to etch his name into its legacy. His confidence teetered on arrogance, a shield honed over years of proving himself in cutthroat boardrooms and alien outposts. He knew his technical prowess and disarming charm gave him an edge, but beneath the bravado lay a restlessness. Earth had grown stale, too predictable, too small for his ambitions. Virion was his chance to build something monumental, to feel alive in the chaos of the unknown. "You're chasing glory, Cole," his old mentor's voice echoed in his mind, a warning from years ago. But glory's a lonely bedfellow. Jackson had laughed it off then, and now, standing in Virion's bustling concourse, he pushed the memory aside. He wasn't here for love or permanence, just a spark, a fleeting thrill to break the monotony of this cosmic frontier. "Mr. Cole," a synthetic voice chimed from his wrist comm, "the gala begins in 1 hour. Your presence is expected." Jackson smirked, straightening his charcoal suit, its tailored lines accentuating his lean frame. "Wouldn't miss it," he muttered, though his tone carried a hint of irony. Galas were a necessary evil, schmoozing diplomats and dodging bizarre delicacies, but they also held potential. In a place like Virion, opportunity wore many faces. He stepped onto a levitating platform, the station's neon spires flashing past as it carried him toward the gala hall. The air buzzed with possibility, and Jackson's pulse quickened. Whatever Virion had in store, he was ready to meet it head-on. The gala swirled around Jackson, a sensory storm of pulsing lights, alien perfumes, and creatures draped in fabrics that shimmered like liquid starfire. His charcoal suit, tailored to his lean frame, marked him as an outsider among the kaleidoscope of Virionian fashion, tentacled robes, crystalline capes, and glowing neural weaves. He navigated the crowd with practiced ease, sidestepping a multi-eyed Clythian whose ozone-scented words grated on his nerves. "A moment to discuss trade routes?" the Clythian buzzed. "Another time," Jackson replied, flashing a tight smile, his mind already elsewhere. A Voric envoy thrust a platter of wriggling, luminescent grubs toward him, their bioluminescence pulsing in rhythm with the music. "A delicacy," the envoy chirped. "Pass," Jackson said, waving it off, his stomach churning. He needed a drink, something to dull the chaos. Leaning against a glowing pillar, he scanned the crowd, his sharp eyes catching every detail. The flutter of a diplomat's wings, the glint of a merchant's jeweled claws. Then, his gaze locked onto her. On a floating platform at the hall's center, Lyrian commanded the room, her voice a rich blend of authority and warmth, each word resonating like a note in a symphony. Her emerald green skin gleamed under the lights, polished jade catching every hue. A silver gown draped her form, its delicate folds teasing the curves beneath without bearing too much, a masterclass in restraint and allure. Jet black hair fell in waves, framing a face that was both regal and deeply knowing, her amber eyes scanning the crowd with quiet power. Jackson's breath caught, his pulse quickening. Her full figure, accentuated by the gown's elegance, drew his gaze, but it was more than physical. There was a poised confidence in her movements, a maturity, perhaps 50 in human years, he guessed, from the faint lines framing her eyes and the weight of experience in her stare. She wasn't just beautiful. She was magnetic, a force that pulled him in without effort. "Who is she?" he murmured to a passing aide, keeping his tone casual. "Director Lyrian," the aide replied, "Virion's heart and mind." Jackson nodded, his lips curving into a faint smile. Heart and mind, indeed. He sipped his drink, never taking his eyes off her, already calculating his next move. Lyra descended from the floating platform, her silver gown catching the gala's lights like a comet's tail, her aides trailing like satellites. Jackson saw his opening and moved, weaving through the crowd with purpose. His practiced smile was ready, but beneath it, a flicker of anticipation stirred. Something about her presence unsettled his usual composure. He stepped into her path, extending a hand. Director Lyra, a pleasure to meet you. Jackson Cole, Nexus Array Coordinator. Her amber eyes met his, sharp and piercing, as if peeling back his charm to weigh the man beneath. The intensity sent a jolt through him, electric and unfamiliar. She took his hand, her grip firm, her emerald skin unexpectedly warm against his. "Mr. Cole," she said, her voice low and resonant, "I've heard of you. Your ambition precedes you like a storm front." "Only the good kind of storm, I hope," he replied, his grin widening to mask the quickening of his pulse. "The kind that builds, not breaks." Her laugh was rich, throaty, a sound that seemed to ripple through the air and settle in his chest. "Intriguing things, Mr. Cole. Your reputation is multifaceted." She tilted her head, studying him. "Tell me, do you always wear confidence like armor?" "Only when I'm in good company," he shot back, his tone light but his eyes holding hers. "Keeps the conversation lively." "Does it?" Her lips quirked, a glint of amusement in her gaze. "Then let's test that. Shall we discuss the Nexus Array? Somewhere quieter, perhaps, away from this circus." She gestured subtly at the swirling crowd, her tone carrying a hint of disdain for the gala's excess. Jackson raised an eyebrow, catching the undercurrent in her words. "Business is my forte, Director, but I'm betting you've got more than quantum gates on your mind." Her smile turned sly, a curve of lips that promised secrets. "Perhaps I do. You're perceptive, Mr. Cole. A rare trait." She stepped closer, her scent, a mix of star bloom and something earthier, brushing his senses. "Follow me. Let's see if Virion's hospitality matches your expectations." Lyra guided Jackson through the gala's clamor, her silver gown trailing like a whisper of starlight as they slipped past diplomats and revelers. She led him to a private terrace, its transparent floor revealing Virion's core below, a mesmerizing dance of neon spires and pulsing energy streams that wove through the station like veins of light. The view was breathtaking, a testament to Virion's ambition, but Jackson's attention was tethered to her. Lyra leaned against the railing, her emerald skin catching the glow, her gown shimmering with every subtle movement. "So, Mr. Cole," she said, her voice a velvet caress, "what draws a human to a place like Virion? Surely not just the promise of quantum gates." Her amber eyes held his, probing, as if searching for the truth behind his charm. Jackson stepped closer, dropping the polished formality he'd worn like a mask. "The possibilities, Lyra. Building something that binds galaxies. It's a challenge most only dream of." He paused, his gaze flickering to the spires below, then back to her. "It's the chance to create something that outlives me." Her lips curved, a knowing smile that hinted at depths unseen. "Legacy, then? A human obsession?" She tilted her head, her jet black hair shifting like a dark tide. "But legacy can be cold company. What else catches your eye, Jackson? What stirs your blood?" He met her gaze, a playful glint in his eyes, though her question stirred something deeper, a restlessness he rarely acknowledged. "Some things," he said, his voice low, "are best discussed privately." Lyrian's laugh was a warm, throaty ripple that sent a shiver down his spine, like a touch he could feel but not see. "Bold," she said, her tone approving. "I like that. Tell me, are you versed in Virionian customs?" "Enough to be respectful," Jackson replied, choosing his words with care, sensing the weight of her scrutiny. "And curious enough to learn more." "Respect is fine," she murmured, her eyes gleaming with a spark that felt both inviting and dangerous. She leaned closer, the space between them shrinking, her scent, star bloom, and something richer, like spiced earth, curling around him. But I prefer passion. Virionians value what burns beneath the surface. Jackson, do you? His pulse quickened, her words a challenge he couldn't resist. I've been known to, he said, his voice steady but laced with heat. Show me what Virion considers passion, and I'll keep up. Her smile widened, a promise wrapped in mystery. Careful what you wish for, Mr. Cole. You might find our fire consuming. Lyrian's amber eyes flicked sidelong, catching Jackson in a gaze that felt like a spotlight, both warm and unrelenting. Most humans chase youth, she said, her voice a low murmur, each word deliberate. Untested energy, fleeting sparks. Why is that, Jackson? What do you seek in fire? Jackson leaned against the terrace railing, his smirk masking the way her question tugged at something buried. Youth has its charm, he said, his tone light but his eyes steady on hers. But I prefer a woman who knows herself. Experience isn't a flaw, it's a strength. A map of battles won, choices made. He paused, letting the words hang. That's what holds my attention. Her hum was soft, amused, but there was a flicker of something deeper in her expression. Curiosity, perhaps, or recognition. Careful, Jackson, she said, her lips curving into a teasing smile. That almost sounds sincere. A dangerous thing to admit in a place like Virion. It is sincere, he replied, his chuckle low, a shield against the vulnerability her gaze seemed to coax out. But don't worry, Director. My secrets are safe with you, aren't they? Lyrian's smile widened, a glint of mischief in her amber eyes. For now, she purred, stepping closer, the space between them shrinking to a breath. Her emerald skin glowed faintly under the terrace's soft lights, and her scent, star bloom laced with a darker, spiced note, wrapped around him like a promise. You intrigue me, Jackson Cole. Not many humans would value scars over starlight. Scars tell better stories, he said, his voice quieter now, the flirtation edged with something raw. And I'm betting you've got stories worth hearing. Her laugh was a velvet ripple, warm and unguarded, and it stirred a heat in him he hadn't expected. Bold and perceptive, she said, her tone approving. A rare combination. She leaned in, her breath brushing his ear as she whispered, Tonight, I'll show you a Virionian tradition you'll never forget. My quarters, after the gala. The code is, her voice dropped to a melodic sequence, a string of sounds that vibrated like a song, intimate and fleeting. Don't be late. Before he could respond, she slipped away, her silver gown blending into the gala's crowd like a shadow, dissolving into night. Jackson stood rooted, his breath shallow, the station's neon lights blurring at the edges of his vision. He'd come to Virion for quantum gates and legacy. Not this, a whispered invitation from its enigmatic director. His lips curve into a grin, pulse racing. Whatever lay ahead, it would be unforgettable. At the appointed hour, Jackson punched the whispered code into the panel, his fingers steady despite the pulse hammering in his veins. The door to Lyrian's quarters slid open, revealing a softly lit chamber where bioluminescent vines curled along the walls, their faint glow mingling with the shimmer of floating orbs. A heady floral scent, laced with something deeper like spiced amber, curled through the air, stirring his senses and quickening his breath. Lyrian lounged on a cushioned bench, her silver gala gown replaced by a sheer sapphire robe that draped her emerald skin like liquid starlight, clinging to her curves with a tantalizing subtlety. Her jet-black hair spilled over her shoulders, framing her face in waves that seemed to drink in the light. She was ethereal, breathtaking, yet her amber eyes held a grounded intensity that anchored her allure in something profoundly real. "Welcome, Mr. Cole," she said, her voice husky, each syllable a caress that sent a shiver through him. "No trouble finding me?" "None at all," Jackson replied, forcing his voice to stay even as he stepped inside, the door sealing behind him. "Your security's as impressive as your taste in decor." Lyrian's lips curved into a knowing smile, her eyes gleaming with amusement and something sharper, desire, perhaps, or curiosity. Efficiency is a virtue here, she said, rising slowly, her robe shifting to reveal the graceful lines of her form. As is candor. I invited you not for work, Jackson, but for pleasure. You intrigue me. Your confidence, your wit, the way you see through facades. She paused, tilting her head. But tell me, what drives a man like you to step into the unknown like this? Jackson met her gaze, his usual charm tempered by the weight of her question. He said simply, the words slipping out before he could overthink it. You're not just a puzzle, Lyrian. You're a challenge, one I can't walk away from. Her laugh was low, warm, a sound that seemed to wrap around him. Flattery, Mr. Cole? Or truth? Truth, he said, stepping closer, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from her. He took her hand, her emerald skin smooth and warm under his touch, and raised it to his lips, kissing it gently, his eyes never leaving hers. I'm here because you're unlike anyone I've ever met, and I want to know more. Lyrian's breath hitched, almost imperceptible, but enough to embolden him. She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. What do humans find fulfilling in intimacy, Jackson? What makes your heart race, your soul burn? He leaned in, his breath grazing her ear, the closeness sending a spark through him. It's connection, he murmured. Not just bodies, but minds. It's finding someone who matches your fire and dares you to burn brighter. He pulled back slightly, meeting her eyes. Let me show you. Her smile was slow, radiant, a promise of what lay ahead. Show me then, she said, her voice a velvet challenge. But be warned, Jackson, Virionian passion runs deep. Are you ready to drown in it? Try me, he said, his grin fierce, heart pounding. I'm a quick learner. Jackson's hand brushed Lyrian's waist, his fingers trailing lightly over the sapphire robe, the sheer fabric a whisper against her emerald skin. The touch was tentative, a question, and her eyes flickered with a spark of approval. You've known humans before, he said, his voice low, teasing, but laced with genuine curiosity. Many, she purred, her tone rich with experience, her amber eyes glinting as she stepped closer, closing the distance. Some fleeting, some memorable, but none quite like you, Jackson Cole. Yet here you are, he teased, his smirk softening into something warmer, his gaze searching hers for a hint of what lay beneath her poised exterior. What makes me different? Lyrian leaned in, her lips hovering near his jaw, her breath warm and electric against his skin. I know how to please humans, she whispered, her voice a velvet promise that sent a shiver through him. But you don't just take. You see, that's rare. His eyes locked onto hers, the weight of her words sinking in. My turn, then, he said, his voice steady but thick with intent. He slid his hand to the small of her back, pulling her gently closer. Let's see if I can surprise you. Lyrian's laugh was soft, unguarded, a sound that broke through her regal facade and lit the room. Surprise me, Jackson, she challenged, murmured, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. Show me what a human heart can do. What followed was a night of unparalleled intensity, a symphony of sensation that left them both breathless. Lyrian was a maestro, her every touch deliberate, guiding Jackson through waves of pleasure with a skill that spoke of deep understanding, not just of the body, but of desire itself. She knew the human form, every pressure point, every subtle shift that sparked fire, and she wielded that knowledge with fierce, unbridled passion. Jackson surrendered to her, not out of weakness, but out of awe, letting himself be swept into her rhythm. Yet he matched her, his own hands exploring with a mix of reverence and hunger, attuned to her every sigh, every tremor. He teased where she commanded, lingered where she urged, learning her as she unraveled him. You're impossible, he gasped at one point, half laughing, half dazed, as her fingers found a spot that made his vision blur. Impossible is my specialty, she replied, her voice husky with amusement, her eyes gleaming with delight. And you're no amateur yourself. Their connection transcended the physical, a dance of curiosity and reverence that wove their laughter, whispers, and shared vulnerabilities into something deeper. "Tell me something true," she murmured in a quiet moment, her head resting against his chest, her voice soft but insistent. "Something you've never told anyone." Jackson hesitated, his fingers tracing circles on her skin. "I'm afraid of being forgotten," he admitted, the words spilling out before he could stop them. "Of building something massive, like the Nexus Array, and still fading into nothing." Lyrian lifted her head, her gaze piercing but gentle. "No one who burns this brightly fades, Jackson," she said, her voice firm. "Not to those who truly see you." She kissed him then, slow and deliberate, sealing the moment. They lost themselves in each other, the night unfolding in a cascade of shared secrets and unspoken promises, each touch a conversation, each laugh a bridge between their worlds. As Virion's twin stars crested the station's horizon, their lights spilling through the chamber's viewport, Jackson lay awake, Lyrian's warmth still lingering on his skin. The night had been extraordinary, a tapestry of passion and vulnerability that left him both exhilarated and unmoored. Her touch, her whispered truths, the way her laughter had woven into his own, replayed in his mind like a melody he couldn't shake. He knew, with a certainty that both thrilled and unsettled him, that something had shifted within him. Days later, Jackson threw himself into the Nexus Array's construction, overseeing quantum relays and negotiating with alien contractors with his usual precision. But Lyrian haunted his thoughts, her emerald skin glowing in the dark, her voice a velvet anchor, her presence a riddle he couldn't stop solving. At meetings, he caught himself sketching her silhouette in the margins of his tablet, then erased it, chiding himself for distraction. "Focus, Cole," he muttered, staring at a schematic, but her words, "no one who burns this brightly fades, echoed, tugging at a longing he hadn't named. He respected her role as director, her days consumed by Virion's demands, trade disputes, diplomatic summits, the weight of a station that thrived under her guidance. He gave her space, sending only brief messages about project updates, though each one carried an unspoken question. "When will I see you again?" Their connection lingered, deeper than mere attraction, a thread that pulled at his heart even as he tried to bury it in work. One night his wristcom chimed, displaying a cryptic message, "Observation Dome, 2,300 hours." Jackson's pulse quickened, a grin breaking through his fatigue. He arrived at the dome, a vast chamber where a massive viewport framed the cosmos, stars and nebulae swirling in silent splendor. Lyrian stood alone, her silhouette stark against the starfield, her sapphire robe catching the faint glow. She gazed outward, her expression unreadable, a mix of resolve and something softer, almost wistful. "The universe is vast, Jackson," she said without turning, her voice low, carrying the weight of someone who'd seen its edges. "Full of wonders, planets that sing, voids that whisper. It humbles even the proudest hearts." Jackson stepped beside her, his eyes tracing her profile before settling on the stars. "It does," he said, his tone quiet but firm. "But the best wonders are closer. Right here, in this room." She turned to him, her amber eyes catching the starlight, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "You're persistent, Mr. Cole," she said, her voice tinged with amusement. "Or is it stubbornness?" "Call it clarity," he replied, meeting her gaze. "I've built my life chasing big things, arrays, legacies. But standing here looking at you, I'm starting to think the smallest moments might matter more." Lyrian's smile faded, replaced by a look of quiet intensity. "Careful, Jackson," she said, her voice softer now. "Words like that can bind you, and I'm not sure either of us is free to be bound." "Maybe not," he said, stepping closer, his voice steady. "But I'm not running from it. Are you?" Her eyes searched his, a storm of emotions flickering within, desire, caution, and something deeper, unguarded. "Not yet," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. "But the stars don't wait, and neither does Virion." Lyrian turned to face Jackson, her amber eyes a storm of emotions, resolve, longing, and a flicker of fear that caught him off guard. The starlight from the observation dome's viewport cast her emerald skin in a soft glow, but it was the rawness in her gaze that held him captive. "Our night together," she began, her voice low, almost hesitant. "It meant something, Jackson. More than I expected. But my role here." She gestured vaguely toward the cosmos, as if it encompassed Virion's weight on her shoulders. "It leaves little room for more." Jackson nodded, his throat tightening at her candor. "I understand," he said, his voice steady despite the acre words stirred. "Your duties come first. Virion needs you. Hell, the galaxy does. I'm not here to pull you away from that." Her eyes softened, a faint smile touching her lips, but there was a tremor in her voice as she spoke again. "Yet, I feel drawn to you," she admitted, the words heavy with vulnerability. "Your warmth, your humor, the way you challenge me without fear, it's rare. In all my years, I've met countless souls, but none who make me feel." She paused, searching for the word, her gaze dropping to the floor. "Seen." Jackson's chest tightened, her confession unraveling something within him. He stepped closer, his voice gentle but firm. "You're seen, Lyrian, not just as the director, but as you, the woman who carries a universe on her shoulders and still finds room to laugh." She looked up, her eyes shimmering with unshed emotion. "You make it sound simple," she said, a wry edge to her voice. "But my life is a tapestry of obligations, trade pacts, council votes, crises that never sleep. I can't offer you a conventional bond, Jackson. My heart, it's not entirely mine to give." He took her hand, his fingers lacing through hers, her warmth grounding him. "I'm not asking you to change, Lyrian," he said, his gaze unwavering. "I don't need conventional. I just want to be part of your world, however that looks, stolen moments, late-night talks, whatever you can spare. I'm in if you are." Her breath hitched, and for a moment, she studied him, as if weighing his words against the chaos of her life. "You're a fool, Jackson Cole," she said at last, her voice soft, almost teasing, but her eyes betrayed a depth of feeling that made his heart race. "A stubborn, reckless fool." "Guilty," he said, a grin breaking through, though his tone carried a quiet earnestness. "But I'd rather be your fool than anyone else's." Lyrian's laugh was a fragile, beautiful thing, breaking the tension like a star bursting into light. "Then we'll find a way," she said, her voice resolute, her grip tightening on his hand. "A way to carve out something real, even in the cracks of our duties. But it won't be easy, Jackson. Are you sure you want this?" He squeezed her hand, his smile softening. "I've never been sure of anything. Let's make it work together." Her eyes softened, a quiet promise forming between them, fragile but fierce, like a star born in the void. Their relationship wove itself into a tapestry of stolen moments, each thread delicate yet resilient, defying the chaos of their worlds. Quiet dinners in Lyrian's private quarters, where the hum of Virion faded behind plates of Starbound-dusted delicacies, became their sanctuary. "You're getting better at this," Lyrian teased one evening, her amber eyes glinting as Jackson attempted a Virionian toast, mangling the melodic syllables. "Almost convincing. Give me a century," Jackson grinned, raising his glass, "and I'll sing it better than you." Her laugh, warm and unguarded, filled the room, a sound that grounded him more than any station's gravity. Secret meetings in hidden alcoves, tucked behind maintenance shafts or veiled by holographic walls, offered fleeting escapes. "This feels like rebellion," Jackson murmured once, his fingers brushing her emerald skin as they sat in a dimly lit nook, the station's pulse a distant thrum. "Rebellion." Lyrian arched an eyebrow, her voice playful but edged with truth. "For me, it's survival. These moments, they remind me I'm more than Virion's director." She leaned into his touch, her eyes softening. "What do they mean to you?" "Everything," he said, the words slipping out raw and unfiltered. "They're the only time I stop chasing tomorrow and just live." Late-night talks under the observation dome starfield became their ritual, where words flowed as freely as the cosmos. Jackson learned Virionian culture, its rituals of star worship, its intricate caste dances, through Lyrian stories. "Your people move like they're speaking to the universe," he said, watching her trace a constellation on the viewport. "What's it saying back?" "It listens," she replied, her voice soft, almost reverent. "But it demands we listen to ourselves, to each other. Have you ever tried, Jackson, to hear what your heart whispers?" He looked at her, the question stirring a quiet ache. "I'm starting to," he admitted. "Because of you." Jackson offered his human perspective to Virion's challenges, advising Lyrian on trade disputes or cultural clashes with off-world delegates. "Your empathy is your edge," he told her during a tense negotiation with a Clythian envoy. "They expect a machine. Give them a soul." She smiled, a rare vulnerability in her gaze. "And you, Jackson, your soul is bolder than you let on. Don't hide it." Her words pushed him to see himself anew, to lead with conviction rather than just charm. Lyrian, in turn, taught him galactic history, the rise and fall of empires, the scars of wars etched in nebulae. "Power is a fleeting thing," she said one night, her voice heavy with lessons hard-learned. "It's the connections we forge that endure. Like this." She squeezed his hand, her touch a lifeline. "Do you ever regret it?" Jackson asked, his voice quiet. "Carrying all this responsibility?" "Every day," she confessed, her eyes distant. "But then I look at you, and I remember why I keep going." Her honesty, raw and unadorned, cracked something open in him. Their intimacy deepened, tender and profound. Each touch a conversation, each glance a shared secret. In the quiet of her quarters, they found solace, a haven from the pressures of their roles. Her, as Virion's steward, him, as the Nexus Array's architect. "You make the universe feel smaller," Jackson whispered once, his lips brushing her temple as they lay entwined. "Like it fits right here, in this moment." "And you make it feel infinite," Lyrian replied, her voice thick with emotion. "Like I could lose myself and still be found." Over time, their bond became love, unexpected but undeniable, a quiet force that reshaped their worlds. It wasn't the love of storybooks, loud and all-consuming, but a steady flame, burning bright in the cracks of their duties, illuminating corners of their souls they'd long kept shadowed. Years slipped by, each one a constellation of triumphs and quiet moments that bound Jackson and Lyrian closer. The Nexus Array launched with a blaze of light, its quantum gates stitching galaxies together, cementing Virion's place as a galactic hub. Jackson stayed, no longer just a brash coordinator, but a respected consultant, his human perspective shaping new projects, orbital habitats, cultural exchanges that wove Virion's diverse threads into a vibrant whole. "You've changed this place," a Virionian elder told him once, clasping his shoulder. "You've given us heart." Jackson smiled, deflecting with a quip, but the words lingered. His heart, though, belonged to Lyrian. Their love flourished, a delicate balance of duty and desire, carved from stolen dinners and starlit confessions. They navigated her role as director and his relentless drive with a rhythm only they understood. "We're like binary stars," Jackson said one night, tracing her emerald skin as they lay in her quarters. "Orbiting, pulling, never quite colliding." Lyrian laughed, her amber eyes warm. "Poetic, but inaccurate. We collide plenty." Her teasing kiss proved her point, leaving him breathless and grinning. One evening, as Virion's twin stars painted the sky, Lyrian approached him in their favorite alcove, a secluded nook overlooking the station's core. Her sapphire robe shimmered, but her expression was different, tentative, almost nervous, a rare crack in her poised facade. "Jackson," she began, her voice soft but resolute, "I want to discuss something personal, something transformative." He set down his tablet, sensing the weight in her tone. "You've got my full attention," he said, leaning forward, his usual humor tempered by curiosity. "What's on your mind?" She took a breath, her hands clasping briefly before relaxing. "I want a child," she said, her eyes locking onto his. Our child, born naturally. Not through Virionian biotech, but us. Her voice trembled slightly, betraying the depth of her longing. I know it's unconventional, even risky. Our biologies, the politics, it's a labyrinth. But I want this with you. Jackson's breath caught, her words hitting like a comet. A child. The idea hadn't crossed his mind, not in the whirlwind of arrays and councils. He searched her face, seeing the vulnerability beneath her strength, the fierce hope in her eyes. A child, he repeated, testing the word, his mind racing. You've thought this through, haven't you? Endlessly, she admitted, a wry smile flickering. Virionian reproduction is often artificial, precise, controlled. But I've seen human families, Jackson, messy, chaotic, real. I want that chaos with you. I want a legacy that breathes. She paused, her voice dropping. But only if you do. This isn't a command or a duty. It's a choice. He leaned back, his heart pounding, images flashing. Lyrian's laugh, their shared nights, the life they'd built in the margins. A child would change everything, a leap into the unknown. But as he looked at her, her longing mirroring a quiet ache he hadn't named, he felt a certainty settle in. I want it too, he said, his voice steady, a smile breaking through. I want this with you. Messy, chaotic, all of it. Lyrian's eyes shimmered, relief and joy mingling as she reached for his hand. You're sure? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. This won't be easy. The science, the scrutiny. Let it come. Jackson interrupted, squeezing her hand, his grin fierce. We've faced worse odds. Together, we'll figure it out. You, me, and whoever this kid turns out to be. Her laugh was a burst of light, her grip tightening. A bold fool, as always, she said, her voice thick with emotion. But my fool. She leaned in, her kiss a promise, sealing their new chapter under Virion stars.